My initial experience with the QL core was that it was kind of frustrating. Never having seen a QL in the wild, getting to grips with its idiosyncrasies was tricky. But with some prompts from the next Facebook groups and looking through some old QL manuals, I'd managed to get a couple of games in the QL core release to run, and copied a game onto the QL core from the internet to run on there. In this video I thought I'd revisit the QL and try and get some more games running, or at least one more. The game I got running before was a lunar lander type game called Ares, and it was running unplayably fast. The thing to do was to run a slow command before running it, I was told. I knew the left and right cursors moved the ship left and right, but I couldn't figure out how to do the thrust. So starting up the core, press C to go into it, and then select it from the slots. The core boots up, takes a little while, and then you're into the toolkit, so you can type commands down at the bottom. DDOWN takes you into a folder, so DDOWN Games takes me into the Games folder, and from there I can view different files. So if I view the Ares BAS file, I can see the code, and scrolling down it I can see the thrust procedure, and then looking at the control procedure I can see that there's a line key row 7 equals 4, which must be what detects the thrust key. So I didn't know which key the thrust key was, but just by looking at that line I could try and identify which key it was. So jumping on to Copilot and asking what that key row 7 equals 4 meant. So it's got some idea about how QL but Super Basic works for the keys, and then looking at the keyboard mapping in more detail, it says that the keyboard is organised into 8 rows with 8 keys. So I'm looking at key row 7. So scrolling down, and key row 7 is in the numeric keys, punctuation and special symbols, which might explain why I couldn't figure out which key it was. So asking again which key that key row 7 equals 4 is, it's given me more of a breakdown, and it says that key row 7 equals 4 means the 8 key is being pressed. So I'm pretty sure I tried that on the game, and that didn't actually do anything. So going back to the game and running it again. So LRUN runs the basic game. So the game is running too fast, and also I didn't know which the thrust key was. So for the speed issue, hopefully the slow command will slow it down so I can play it. So just by trying the different keys, I worked out that the thrust key was the extend key, so one of the special keys, which might be why I haven't figured it out. So you've got to try not to thrust too much, or the temperature of your ship goes into the red and then you just explode. So with the left and right and thrust I'm able to get it on target, but after a whole bunch of goes, still struggling to land the lunar lander. So that's probably because the game is running too fast. But keeping going at it, if I time it just right, I managed to land it. So now I've got a score of 32, and it's asking me to enter my name, so I'm on the high score table. So getting somewhere now. So looking at the slow command, somebody had written a comment saying that I could use the slow command to slow the QL core down, and that it took values between 0 and 7. So to start off with, I'll just set it to 0. Then so back into the games folder, and then run the Aries bash program. So starting off, the game speed seems to be just the same, so 0 is not really helping. It did say on Copilot that you can give slow values from 0 to 255, but that conflicts with what I'd been told in the comments. So I'll just try setting it to 7 and see what effect that has. The QL didn't have dot characters in file names, so on the QL you use an underscore instead of the dot command, and also in your file paths where you expect slashes in DOS, for instance, it uses underscores there as well. So now the game has slowed down a bit, and it's getting a bit more playable. So the thrust is working a bit easier, and so I managed to land fairly quickly there. So back on the board, and the game is definitely a lot easier to play now, but as you can see, it's still not super easy. So I've made some progress with this game, and I'll go on to look at some more. So jumping onto the web, looking for some more QL games that I can play. I found a repository of public domain games. So going into the games section, there's a whole bunch of games I can try. You can see the Aries game there that I have just been playing. So I picked out a few games that were simple and would be easy to copy onto the QL. So the first one is Ghost Bass, and there's a text file which explains how to play it. So you have to first eat a pill, and then you eat the ghost, and then you go to a certain place on the screen. So that's that one. And then Reverse Eye, that help file was all in German. So jumping onto Google Translate, I could copy that German into Google Translate to see what it meant. So it gives some instructions, but it says partway down that you have to use a mouse. I don't have a mouse on my Spectrum, so I don't think I can play that game, so I'll skip over that one. And then Galaxia, that looked like you had to set it up using boot, which I don't know how to do on the QL at the moment, so I'll skip that one. And then Froggy, so that's a basic file, but it's got 2 additional files, .code files, but I might be able to get that one to work. And then PC versus QL, nothing like a bit of PC bashing, or in this case squashing. So the QL is trying to bash the PC, so that looks quite simple, so I might be able to get that one to work. And then Space Pods, this looks like a bit of a Gravitar meets Asteroids. There's a PNG that explains the commands, and then another PNG that shows a screenshot of the game, which looks quite interesting. And again, that's just a basic file and a CDE file, so maybe I can get that one to run. So I copied all the necessary files into one folder, and then dropped those onto my SD card on the next. And then I go into QL. The EU SDIR command allows me to look at the files on my SD card. So the syntax is EW SDIR comma #1, and then that shows the files on the SD card, so I can see the different directories and then the files. So I can see that I've got my QL directory where I put those files. So if I want to copy the files off that directory, I use the command scopy semicolon and then the file name in the QL folder, which follows a Windows type path, so QL/ and then the file name including dot, so .bas for this froggy.bas, and then you're copying it into your QL QXL file, so you then have to use the QL naming convention, which is underscores. So if I run that command, so it's done that. So I then have to go through and do all the other files that I want to see on there individually. There doesn't seem to be a wildcard way of doing this, so that is a bit laborious at the moment. It's quite easy to get something wrong, but I'll just zoom through those. So there's about 6 or 7 files I want to copy across. So having done all those, I can then look at what's in that games folder that I've copied them into, and I should see all those files there. So DDOWN into the folder, and then dir lets me look at what's in the folder. So I can see that I've got all those different files. So Aries_Bass is the game I was playing earlier, and then I've got Ghost, Froggy, PC versus QL, and Space Bots to try. So if I set the slow to 7, because that seemed to work reasonably well on Aries, and then to run a basic game, LRUN, so I'll start with Space Bots, because that looked like probably the most interesting game. So it's giving an error at line 20. So if I go into the basic for that Spacebots Bass file using the view command, maybe I can see what the problem is there. So there is only 3 lines of code, but on line 20 it's using the microdrive MDV1. So at the moment I don't know how to set that up, so I'm going to skip that game, maybe go back to that later. Possibly if I remove that reference to MDV1 it might just work, but I'll try that at a later date. So next, going on to the PC versus QL, I'm going to try that on easy. We've got the loading screen, so we're into the game. So at the top you've got the QL, and down at the bottom you've got the PC. So the idea is to just bash those PC columns back down. It's as simple as that. I don't think there's really anything more to this game, and because I started it off on easy, it's very slow to start with. So I guess if you start on more difficult level, it gets faster and faster until it gets impossible. So I don't think there's much more to that game. Quite a simple game. So bear in mind, these games are public domain games. These are not commercial games. They're just something I'm trying to see if I can get stuff running with the QL. So the next game I'm going to try is the Froggy game. So that's got a basic file and it's got 2 .code files, and I've got an error this time on line 120. So if I view that basic file, and I can see on line 20 it's trying to load from FLP1, which is the floppy. So again, I don't know how to do that at the moment, so I'm going to skip that. It might be that if I just edit that file and take out that floppy 1, I might be able to run that. But I'll just park that one for now. So the final game is the Ghost game. So that's run up. I think even at speed slow 7, I think this game is running a bit fast. So you do die very easily. So if you run into any of the coloured blocks, if you run into the edges of the game, you die. And the Ghost is sort of zipping around. But you can see there's a full stop, which is the pill. So the idea is to get first to the pill. And then once you've got the pill, you can then get the Ghost, and then you can try and exit the level. So controlling this game is quite difficult at this speed. But there I've got the pill, and now I've got the Ghost, so I've got to get out without hitting any of the colour blocks. But yeah, this is quite a tricky game at this speed. So the final question I've got in my mind at the moment is how many games can I actually fit in the QXL.WIN container, which is where the games are going into on the QL. So it's saying that the QL games are often very small, so under 100 kilobytes, and the QXL.WIN container, well, that depends on what size you created it at. So it's talking about 16 megabytes. So if you'd created it at 16 megabytes, you'd fit in 160 games at approximate size of 60 kilobytes per game. So I'm not sure what size I created mine at. But if I go into my next folder on my PC, I should be able to see a copy of that. I just asked how do I find out how big my QXL.WIN container is. So it's saying locate the file on your host system. So I could either do that on the next or just look at the copy that I've got of it on my PC to see how big that is. So going into the next folder on my PC, and I'm looking for QXL.WIN, and then looking at the properties on that, and I can see that it's saying 30 megabytes, so it's probably 32. So that should be good for a whole bunch of games at the size of the games that I've been copying on there. So I think at the moment I don't really need to worry about that. So that's another look at the QL. Got a bit further with it this time. Some of the frustrations of the earlier attempts, I've got past those. So yeah, QL, worth a look, an interesting machine, give it a go. Hope that was interesting, and thanks for watching.